I'm talking about all the things that I'm talking about. So the 4 books, So the 4 books, we have a layman's guide to integrative immunity, and that guide has been translated in Portuguese by Dr. Marcelo's group, and it's at Dr. Marcelo's website, Brazil Sem Allergia. So people can go there, they can read it, and most of the presentation that we're doing today come from here, from that book. My first book was The Allergy Detective, Allergic Rhinitis Treatment Secrets Your Doctor May Not Tell You. In that book, I make clearly the connection between the hormones and the allergic reactions that we see today in many, many women and even men too. And then the hormone imbalance syndrome, America's silent plague, talks about hormone imbalance and the obesity pandemic that we see. And the nasal allergy treatment roadmap is for how do you treat nasal allergies very easily, buying over-the-counter medications. So I'm going to skip all the objectives and stuff like that. I think when you finish this presentation, there are many things that you're going to find out, and I will show you as we go. So when we practice medicine, the old medical practice, goals is maintain chronic diseases with medication and prevent new ones. That's why we do vaccinations. I think the new goal should be to eliminate chronic diseases and prevent the new ones from happening. So to prevent and eliminate diseases, we should have a disease model. When I finished residency and fellowship training, and I was practicing medicine, I did not have a disease model. I didn't know, I just jumped into it and I started doing what they taught me to do. But later on, when I thought back, I said, do I have a disease model? Do I really understand why things are happening to people? Do I have certain variables that I can look at to help treat the disease? And so I think that we should have a disease model to be able to make an impact. Now, there's a provider-patient equilibrium welfare. A lot of times you hear provider burnout. So many of the doctors and providers are burning out because they don't understand what is happening to their patient. The reason is they don't understand many of the reasons we have the chronic diseases that are around. And the patients are also not happy because they're not getting results when they go see the doctor. Since they're not getting results, they're frustrated and they're not happy. So I really think both groups should be happy together. And the happy medium would be the equilibrium welfare for providers and for the patients. So a model is a mathematical representation of a theory, and a theory is the explanation behind observed phenomena. So if you see something happening, you have to go behind it to learn why this is happening. And I really think in our 21st century medicine practice, many times we don't go behind to try to understand why. We have a lot of protocols that are the 20th century protocol, the 19th century protocols that we're still using to explain 21st century problems, and it's not matching, it's not working well. So in order to do the model, we have to understand health states. And I think there are 3 health states. We have the for instance, when we see somebody, we say, hi, how are you today? What we expect them to say is, I'm doing really well. I'm happy today. or I'm not feeling so well. I have a cold, or I'm sick. I'm kind of sick. In America, though, when we see people and ask them, how are you today? They all say, I'm fine. I don't know in Brazil, but even if they have a chronic disease, they don't tell you about their disease. They say, I'm fine, I'm okay, thank you. That's it. But we are trying to elicit these 3 states. So based on the 3 states, I think we can calculate probabilities of disease or probabilities of states. For instance, if we are well today, or well last month, or well last year, if this year or this month, somebody asks us, will we be still well, or will we be transiently sick, or will we be diagnosed with a chronic disease like diabetes? And if we're transiently sick, maybe we become well, completely well, or we remain transiently sick, or we can progress to worse. Or if we're chronically sick, we can be well, we can be cured, or we can be transiently sick, or we can remain chronically sick. Unfortunately, in old medicine, what we've been doing is keep people in this chronic sick state. They have a condition, we give them medication to maintain them right here, so then they can go by their days, but they're not completely recovering. So what is the probability of being in this chronically sick state? You take this number and you divide by the stock where they came from, and that gives you the probability. I think that any of these probabilities that we calculate will depend on the endocrine system and the immune system interaction. But if you look at those 2 interactions, that will explain maybe 95% of the chronic diseases that we see around. So that's what we're going to cover today. So the interaction effect between the immune system and the endocrine system is very important. Now, based on that, I did present what I call the value ladder, patient-provider value ladder, which means if we, health is our wealth. If you have no health, you have no wealth. Even if you have billions of dollars and your health is poor, you cannot enjoy these billions of dollars. So our goal is to be at the highest possible of the health, the wealth. But to do that, we have to have good health. But the good health comes with price. Many times people don't want to pay much, but they want to have good health. Health is expensive in many places, like in the US. So if you don't pay much, you're going to get very little health. And if the government doesn't sponsor health, then you're not going to be well. So many people are taking tons of medications every day, maybe 5, 10 medications every day to maintain their disease. These people are at the bottom of the ladder. Now, we can move them a little bit to here, or we can move them to there, or the ultimate goal is to move everybody to be well. So if they have diabetes, we don't want them to remain diabetic, we want them to be well. And I think in the 21st century, we do have the means to help people be well completely, if we understand what is causing it. So the major medical practice challenge is practice environmental mismatch. When we go to medical school, we don't really learn much about the environment. We don't learn about the food production. So if we don't learn about the food production, we don't know what goes into it, we don't know what is happening, then when we see the conditions that are related to the food production problems, we don't recognize it. And if we don't, then the patients are not going to do well. So because of the mismatch, the patients are complaining, they're not happy. and they're voting with their feet. For instance, the patient can go to the allergist, they don't get a solution, we send them to gastroenterology for their abdominal problems. Gastroenterologist says, I don't understand it. They send them to naturopath. The naturopath send them to chiropractor. So here, the patients are shopping around. They're going from doctor to doctor to doctor, but not getting results. And one of the major complaints of the patients is that the doctors don't explain to them their problems. So education is lacking in many cases because we don't have time for the patient. When they come, we give them 10, 15 minutes, and those 10, 15 minutes are not cutting it. I really think that we should probably spend more time educating the patient about their conditions. I'm not going to go through all these, but people who would be interested, they can see all the reasons the patients are not happy and what they're complaining about. So the question is, because we're not explaining to the patient that they're not happy, the practitioners are also burning out. They don't feel well, they feel like they're exhausted, and you can see these two people being completely exhausted. So what is the solution? So I created a mentorship program called the Integrative Immunity Mentorship Program to try to help the doctors understand what is happening so then they can help their patients better. And in the US, actually, it's working good. The people that are mentored, they realize that, yes, there's a need for it because they can take care of their patients better. In the mentorship program, we learn to pre-qualify the patient. So I have a questionnaire, 27 pages questionnaire that they use. And then we connect with the patients, we educate them, and we make recommendations. So those are the fees. So I call it PCR. So integrative immunity model. So what is integrative immunity? Well, integrative immunity is the interaction between the endocrine system and the immune system that yield about 95% of the chronic diseases that we see around. So we need to understand these two systems to make a big impact in patients' lives or our own lives. So our observation is that these two systems have increased malfunction. The endocrine system is not working well, and the immune system is not working well. So what is causing the malfunction? I think it is the environmental problem that is detrimental to both systems that is causing the imbalance between these two systems. So what is the evidence? Is there any evidence at all that the environment is causing problems? Well, if you take the US, for instance, Congress spends a lot of time passing laws. So they're passing a lot of pollution laws. I don't know about Brazil, but here since 1947, if you look at all the laws that the government has passed against pollution, it's a lot. From here all the way down, I mean, they continue passing laws about the environment. In 1990, they passed a law called the Organic Food Production Act. So they realized that producing organic food and eating organic food is a good thing. But who is obeying this law? Since they passed the law in 1990, we still have probably 1% of production of organic food in the whole country. And I don't know about Brazil if production of organic food is a mandate, but here it seems to be that people are not following. Drinking Water Act. I think clean water is very important. The question is, what is causing disease in the 21st century? I think we have pollution, microbial accidents that we cannot do a whole lot about, and transit factors. We have genetic malformations, even genetics that may be due to the pollution. Now we talk about epigenetics, meaning how this pollution is affecting our genes. So that means if we don't do anything about the pollution, perhaps our health is going to go really downhill. And what are today's major problems? We have the growing estrogen pandemic, the growing obesity pandemic and comorbidities. We have the growing allergy pandemic, the growing anxiety depression pandemic, and the growing bacterial virus pandemic. So my concern is going to be just the growing allergy pandemic today. And what are the root causes of these problems? Well, can we actually use a multi-specialty approach to solve these problems, or should we use integrative immunity? I think integrative immunity is going to be the key to solving these problems together rather than looking at them in silos. I'm stuck now. So these are the common 21st century symptoms that we see when patients come in clinic. Again, I'm not going to go in detail and tell you allergies, food allergies, chronic sinusitis, chronic candidiasis, chronic recurrent viral infections, chronic recurrent bacterial infection, asthma, atopic dermatitis, migraine headaches, hair loss, hyperlipidemia, hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, abdominal problems. We got bloating, cramping, constipation, diarrhea, IBS, candida-related problems, dysmenorrhea for the women, painful menstrual cramps, heavy bleeding, irregular menses, ovarian cysts, polycystic ovaries. For instance, now you see young women, many of them have polycystic ovaries. I don't know about Brazil, but in the United States, that's very common. Fibroid tumors and all of that. The Mayo Clinic did a study and came back with 10 conditions that are more common in 10 conditions that are common in clinics. And those are the 10 conditions. I'm not going to enumerate them, but they're all related to obesity, most of them, if you look at carefully. Now, the conditions continue. You look at angioedema, many of the things that we treat, foggy. So brain fog, a lot of people complain of brain fog. They cannot think straight. So I joke that in the 21st century, decreased libido and brain fog are two major problems that we have. That means we're not going to make babies, and we're not going to have offices probably in a few years because we cannot think straight and we cannot have children. Now, how do we maximize health? We need to know the body, we need to know the environment, and we need to know our foods and beverages. So how do we know about the environment? Well, the US government is actually doing something called biomonitoring. I'm not sure if in Brazil, the government is doing any such thing, but biomonitoring, meaning the government is taking samples of blood and urine of individuals to see what chemicals they're going to find. And every single person they tested has chemicals in them. The babies, they're born with several hundred chemicals in their cord blood, which means that the babies are contaminated from utero in the mother's womb. And because of that contamination, many of the babies are having conditions such as brain tumors. If you, here in the US, if you go to St. Jude websites, all of a sudden, you see all these babies, 3 months old, they have a brain tumor. And you wonder why. That's because of the contamination. Excuse me. So the CDC is presenting, excuse me, the CDC is presenting all these in a table. It's presenting the finding of the biomonitoring in a table called the CDC Fourth Report. And what I have done is go to the CDC Fourth Report and see the chemicals they're finding in our blood and urine to see what they're doing to us. Because even though the CDC is finding these chemicals in our blood and urine, they say, well, don't worry, don't panic yet, we don't know. And they've been doing this since 2001. Up to today, they continue doing that, but they say, oh, don't worry, don't panic, we don't know what the chemicals are doing in your blood and urine. But if we look around, cancer rate is going up, allergies are going up, depression is going up, all of these things are going up. Why? Probably because of the chemicals. Now, many of the chemicals are found affect your thyroid. They're thyroid disruptors. Many of the chemicals, they make the estrogen go up. Again, if you look at metals, mercury, cadmium, lead, they make the estrogen go up. Many of them make acetylcholine go up. A lot of them make the insulin go up. If you look here, the next you see estrogen, estrogen, estrogen. I mean, on the right-hand side, many of the chemicals, they mimic estrogen in the body. So tons of estrogen-related chemicals. More estrogen, big group. So if you look at the majority of the chemicals that the CDC is finding in our blood and urine, they all make estrogen go up. And that's why I think we have an estrogen pandemic. So the chemical called Roundup or the glyphosate is estrogenic until proven otherwise. Actually, they grew that with breast cells and they grew like wildfire. So if you have too much estrogen in the environment, there may be consequences hormonally. There will be a hormone imbalance because estrogen and progesterone go together. Progesterone balances the estrogen. But if we haven't too much estrogen in the environment, what happens to people who are affected by these estrogens? That is what we're going to answer, or we're going to talk about in the few slides coming. So the conclusion when I looked at the CDC fourth report is that we have an estrogen pandemic. We have the organochlorines, which is DDT and the others. DDT was abolished in 1972, but currently DDT is still persistent in the environment. We have the phthalates, we have the heavy metals, we have the glyphosate, we have bisphenol A. Everybody talks about BPA, but BPA is just a little amount of environmental estrogen, majority of them. We have foods such as barley, rye, wheat, spelt, kamut, millet. They're all estrogenic. So if you're eating those, plus the GMO foods, majority of them make your estrogen go up. So in essence, if we're eating foods that are contaminated, we're killing ourselves. We're eating toxins that are affecting us. So estrogen pandemic, so what? Well, it turns out when we have too much estrogen, there are many conditions that your patients will come up with who are going to be related to those estrogen. And I list them here. I'm not going to read them because of the interest of time, but many of the conditions that we see in clinic, they're related to this estrogen pandemic. So we have more conditions that are mimicking the estrogen, caused by estrogen. So when we have these environmental toxins and estrogens, what are the links? Well, we have environmental chemical poisoning, as evidenced by the CDC fourth report. They yield negative externalities in form of cancers. The estrogen overload affects the immune system and affect the allergies. It does also affect the obesity. And then that leads to anxiety, depression, broken relationships when people don't feel well. So divorces and everything else. And then the allergies, we have the environmental, the food sensitivity, the mast cell activation syndrome, the basophil. I'm not sure if in Brazil, you see a lot of mast cell activation syndrome, but in the US, it's becoming more and more. If you go to Facebook, they have a big Facebook group called the histamine intolerance group. They have a mast cell activation syndrome group. Now, I'm thinking something is going on because these patients are very complex. How do we treat them? You can treat them by understanding what is going on. Oh, yeah. So one of the major pathways through which the chemicals affect us is that if we have fruits and vegetables that are sprayed with these insecticides called organophosphates and carbamates, they make acetylcholine available. But these organophosphates, and they cause acetylcholine to increase, acetylcholine has receptors on mast cells and basophils. So when it attaches to its receptor, it causes degranulation of the mast cells. So all of a sudden, we're having a lot of allergic reaction. People eat fruits, they're getting allergic reactions. The acetylcholine, through a cascade on the pancreatic islet cells, leads to insulin increase. So when the insulin increases, it leads to mast cell proliferation. So the mast cells are proliferating, or basophils are proliferating, they're increasing numbers, so they're making available the receptors. So when we have insulin, that leads to obesity. That obesity increases aromatase, and the aromatase is the enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen. So all of a sudden, we have more estrogen around. But the mast cells and basophils, they have an estrogen receptor on them. It's called estrogen receptor alpha. So when they are attached to the receptor alpha, they cause histamine and leukotriene release and mast cell degranulation that leads to allergic reaction. I think this pathway is very important. Obesity leads to leptin resistance. Leptin resistance leads to insulin resistance and diabetes and hypertension. And then when we have leptin resistance, we have unopposed acetylcholine, and that unopposed acetylcholine continues the pathway. Then you can see the cycle goes on and on and on, and nothing stops. Now, people who have organochlorine like DDT contamination, that DDT and its metabolites, they go through the sodium channels on the pancreatic islet cell, and they do exactly the same thing. They end up producing too much insulin. Insulin causes mast cell proliferation, and then we get more allergic reaction, and the cycle will continue through here. Now, there are many other chemicals that we use in production, like corn. If you look at the corn belt in the United States, we have alachlor, acetachlor, metolachlor. Those things affect the thyroid. They also affect the nasal turbinate. So now we see so many patients with nasal turbinate enlargements, probably because of the chemicals that they're exposed to. Now, the thyroid, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The things is unstable, so when I try to change, it doesn't change smoothly. It just jumps around. So please bear with me. The thyroid is produced from phenylalanine. So phenylalanine goes to tyrosine. 4 molecules of iodine attached to the tyrosine, and that becomes T4. T for the tyrosine, the 4 for the 4 molecules of iodine. Now, one of the iodine gets chopped off by deiodinase, which is the enzyme that cuts it off, and that becomes T3. And the T3 is the active thyroid. Now, while the T4 is going to T3, it also goes into reverse T3. And there are many conditions that make the thyroid go to reverse T3. We have low progesterone, too much estrogen, low selenium, low zinc, low potassium, low vitamin D, low iodine, high cortisol. To go to T3, we need many minerals, selenium, zinc, iron, the B vitamins, we need all of those. But many people are not taking nutritional supplements. If they don't take nutritional supplements, they're not going to be able to increase their T3. So they will be going down here because of the estrogen overload. They're making more reverse T3. Unfortunately, when we test the thyroid, we test TSH. And if the TSH is high, we say you have low thyroid. And what do we give them? We give them Synthroid or levothyroxine or Tyrosint. When you give them that, it goes to replace T4, but maybe it's all going here. And that's my experience. I see a lot of people they're converting the T4 to reverse T3, but because we don't measure them, we don't see where they are. So they have low thyroid, but they're still not doing good. They feel tired, they're obese, and their obesity is not going away because we're not addressing the issues. Also, tyrosine makes dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. That's why many women, for instance, when they have Hashimoto's, they have anxiety, they have depression, they have all of that. So very important to realize that they're all connected. So what is common about pesticides and obesity and depression and anxiety and divorce? Well, it turns out the pesticides can cause the obesity, and then obesity can cause obesity can cause anxiety, depression, and stuff because of the chemical imbalances, and then that leads to divorce. So if you look at the areas, they look exactly the same. The areas with the heaviest pesticide spray correspond to the obesity, correspond to the anxiety, depression, correspond to the divorce. But also people have obesity. Men, for instance, they have erectile dysfunction. If they have erectile dysfunction, it's not going to happen well in the bedroom, so marriages are not going to stick either. So that is part of the whole thing. We need to understand the whole picture. I did put obesity in decades, and the more obese people are, the more they die. So morbidity corresponds to the areas where we have more obesity. Wow. I'm trying to pass the stuff, so I'm going to just skip this one. So medical geography. What I've shown is that the areas with the heaviest pesticide spray correspond to the heaviest obesity. Mississippi, if you look, the river starts from Minnesota and it goes all the way to Mississippi. If you look at the pesticide, you see the streak coming down the Mississippi River. You see the streak coming down the Mississippi River, the stream coming down to the Mississippi River. If you look at obesity, Mississippi has the highest. So there's something going on. It doesn't mean that the people in Mississippi are eating more than the people elsewhere. It's just because the pollution goes more down through the river, and major rivers in the United States, like Ohio River, Missouri River, they all dump into it. So that's very important to realize that. So that's what I call medical geography. Many times people say, oh, correlation doesn't mean causation. That's the criticism. But I'm not the first person using correlation maps and trying to explain disease. For instance, John Snow actually did that, and he showed certainly that cholera was not airborne, that cholera was related to foods. So that's how the first medical geography came to be. So we can use maps and we can understand diseases. So allergies and autoimmune diseases, immune complex diseases, as I call them. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of what we call the Environmental Working Group. So in the United States, the Environmental Working Group is the group that does testing of pesticides on our foods and vegetables. We're trying to find out the contamination. And they have come up with the dirty dozen. I don't think we have dirty dozen. I think we have 30,000 of the foods are contaminated. On the list, they did not have peanut, and I think peanut is dirtier. But anyway, they came up with this list, and currently strawberries is #1 in the United States as the dirty food. So they recommend that if you don't eat this food organic, you're killing yourself. So you have to eat all these foods organic. Maybe Brazil is different, but here that's the case. Now, food allergy trends. I said since the mid-1990s, food allergy has gone up, and I'm going to show you what is going on diagram-wise. For instance, anaphylactic reaction, it was going down in 1997, start going up. If you look at angioedema, it was flat right here in 1997, it started going up. If you look at peanut allergy, it was flat right here in 1997, start going up. If you look at celiac disease, it was flat going here in 1996, it started going up. So somebody, Nancy Swanson and her group, they did a study and looked at the advent of glyphosate, which is Roundup, and celiac disease, and they track perfectly well. When we include glyphosate or Roundup in our food chain, all of a sudden, we're having more people with celiac disease. And that's what I'm showing also in a way. So I looked at fish allergy or crustacean allergy, shrimps and stuff that has no relationship to pesticides, and there's no pattern of that nature. When I look at iron deficiency, you can see that it's flat right here in 1997, it's gone up. So many patients have iron deficiency and they don't even know that. So allergic urticaria is more common in women than men. Glyphosate, if they grew that with breast cells and they grew like wildfire. So definitely it's estrogenic. And probably breast cancer is going up because of the chemicals in our environment. It's not like breast cancer falls from the sky. The cancers are falling from the food that we're eating and the water we're drinking that are contaminated. And the breast cancer is worldwide now. Before in Africa, we had very little breast cancer. But now all of a sudden, many young women, they're having breast cancer. You wonder what is going on. That's probably because of the contamination of the environment. If you look at wheat that many people eat worldwide, I mean, there are many chemicals that are used in the production of wheat. I have the atrazine, bromoxamine, all of these chemicals that go into including Roundup. Now, in America, they have something called pre-harvest Roundup spray. So before we harvest wheat, we use Roundup on it. And that is a major issue since the mid-1990s. All of a sudden, people cannot tolerate gluten. But when people have problems, instead of addressing the root cause, we say, well, it's a gluten sensitivity. It's a gluten protein. But why the gluten protein? We ate it for 1,000 years. We didn't have any problems. But now all of a sudden, in the mid-1990s, we eat gluten, we don't feel good. That's because of the chemicals we're spraying on our wheat. So putting it all together, I can just summarize it because of interest of time. I don't have a lot of time to go through the detail, but I have this diagram that I call the macro medicine diagram. I'm not going to go through the macro medicine diagram, but all you have to know is that we have the endocrine system that is completely out, and the immune system that is out. They're interacting. And then we have the estrogen as the pillar, the estrogen as the driver. They make the insulin go up, people crave sweet, they become obese. The fat cells produce TNF-alpha and IL-6. Those are inflammatory cytokines. They cause aches and pains and all of that. They cause allergic diseases, allergic reactions. And then the fat cells, they help the skin cells, the adrenal glands to produce even more estrogen. So when people are obese, and they come into clinic, they're having reactions. It could be because of too much estrogen that we're not covering. The estrogen causes benign tumors, including benign prostatic hyperplasia, and then they cause 7 cancers or 8 cancers in women: breast, uterine, ovarian, vaginal, cervical, colon cancer, and all of that. And the estrogen, as I showed you, they have receptors on the mast cells and basophils. So when they attach to the receptor, they cause histamine release, they cause leukotriene release, and they cause allergies. So that's a pathway through which the estrogen affects the allergies. And the endocrine system is affecting the allergy, because if you view estrogen as from the endocrine system, then all of a sudden we're having a lot of allergic reactions that are due to the endocrine system. Yeah, I'm gonna just pass through this. That's how I built the house. But we're going to skip this one because I don't think that we have time to go through it. But I go step by step. In general, when I have time for the presentation, I go step by step and build this thing and make people aware of what is going on in terms of the connections and everything else. So environmental allergies, asthma, eczema, allergic rhinitis, as you can see, I show that the mast cells, they have the estrogen receptors, and that is affecting the histamine release by the estrogen that make the IgE stronger. So all of a sudden, people who had tons of estrogen, they're reacting more. That's why women in the mid-30s or 40s, when their estrogen is higher than their progesterone, all of a sudden they're having many allergic reactions that people cannot understand. In terms of food allergies, you can see, again, I put the estrogen receptor, I put the acetylcholine receptors, I put the sodium channels on the mast cells, and the same thing. In terms of autoimmune disease, well, Professor Sabra was talking about Th1 and Th2 mismatch. Now we know the Th0 cell can go multiple ways. That's why I call them Superman. They can go to Th1, they can go to Th2, they can go to Th17. And if they go to Th1, they signal the B cells to produce IgE, but also they produce IgM, IgG, IgA. So if they see food that is contaminated, the antigen-presenting cells pick up, show that to the Th0 cell. The Th0 cell is confused because before they used to see clean peptides. When they see clean peptide, they say that's passive. Now that the food is contaminated, they say, well, what do we do with this? So they go to Th1 and then signal the B cell that produce IgM, IgG, IgA, and that complexes with whatever toxin they have here, and that toxin circulates with the antibodies. So the antibody-antigen complex circulating, they lodge in the small vessels and form inflammation. So all of a sudden, we're having a lot of inflammatory processes going. And now if that continues, we say, well, they have autoimmune disease. But autoimmune, the body is not crazy. The body does not attack itself. What the body is attacking is something that it does not like. The body is attacking the toxins, bacteria, and everything else that it doesn't like. When they go to Th2, then the Th2 produces IL-13, stimulate the B cell that produce the IgE. And many of you as allergists, you understand clearly how the IgE comes and attaches to the mast cells and basophils and waits. So next time when people are exposed to the same allergen, it goes and finds the IgEs and attached to it, and the cross-linking of these things occurs that leads to degranulation of the mast cells and basophils, and that leads to allergic reaction. So in our treatments of allergy, what we're doing is basically blocking those chemicals with medication. We block histamine with antihistamine, leukotriene with the leukotriene receptor antagonist. We block all of them together using steroids, and then we do the corticosteroid nasal sprays that have been helping a lot of the patients. But I think these are palliation. They don't solve the underlying condition. We need to go deeper and solve the major issue, which could be the toxins and everything else. So Brazil stem allergy is a noble cause. I really think that we should have Brazil without allergy at all. We should take out all the allergy, but how do we do that? To do Brazil stem allergy or world stem allergy, we have to understand the root cause and eliminate the root cause, and then we'll have no more allergies. That's my thinking. So mast cell activation syndrome, I'm going to go quickly about the mast cells. And now the patient come with all these presentation, skin rashes, hives, swelling, edema, flushing, itching, abdominal problem, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Now they're putting all of these in mast cell activation syndrome. Many more conditions that they're relating to it, and people are showing up in clinic with it. So when I show the mast cell, I show that we have the estrogen receptors, acetylcholine receptors, sodium channels. I told you that insulin makes the proliferation of the mast cells. So when the estrogen or the chemical, the acetylcholine attaches to the mast cell receptors, then they cause degranulation. Estrogen, phytoestrogen attached to the receptor, they cause degranulation. Organochlorine insecticides attached to the, go through the sodium channel, they cause degranulation. So in the end, the mast cell is being activated by chemicals that we have in our environment that we're not addressing the chemicals. So when we see patients in clinic, what do? We measure the end product. We measure our prostaglandins, we measure histamine, we measure all of that, but we're measuring the end product. We're not looking at what is stimulating the mast cell to degranulate. I think we should shift our way of thinking in terms of the conditions and look at what is causing the mast cells to degranulate. That way we can solve the problem. But unless we do that, it may be difficult for us to solve the problem. Now we're inventing biologics, and we're using the biologics to treat things, but how far are we going to go if we're not really addressing the underlying cause? That's the question that I have. When we look at hives, for instance, we see a lot of people who have post-COVID syndrome. They're getting hives. After they get the vaccination, they get hives. After they get COVID, they get hives. Why? Because when we have viral infection, what is produced? Well, we produce IgM initially, then we produce IgG. Well, it turns out that IgG has a receptor on the mast cells. So when tons of it is produced and attached to the receptor, they cause mast cell degranulation. So in the end, we're having more reactions in terms of skin conditions and hives that people are presenting in clinic with. And it goes both ways, men, women, but it looks like more women than men are having those reactions because they already have plenty of estrogens. And if the estrogens are contributing to it, then they're going to have more reactions. If we look at many of the receptors here, you have the gamma receptors, you have the epsilon receptors, you have beta cytokine receptors, chemokine receptors. We have, tons of receptors on the mast cells, and the toll-like receptors through which many of the mast cells can degranulate. So when we have the toxins, they can affect the mast cells and cause tons of reaction that we cannot even comprehend. So we have to learn more about the mast cells and what is triggering them rather than just thinking IgE is the only trigger for the mast cells. Now, when they release histamine, the histamine has multiple problems. The histamine, through the H1 receptors, the H2 receptors, the H3 receptors, the H4 receptors, affect the whole body. So the histamine is not only in the nose. The histamine affects the heart, it affects the gut, it affects the brain, it affects many parts of the body. And that is why people who have so-called mast cell activation syndrome, they don't feel so well because they will come, they say, oh, they have POTS, POTS syndrome. They have EDS, they have this, they have that, they have abdominal problem, they get flushing because the histamine is driving all these reactions. And that's why I wanted to show you all the things that the histamine can affect in the body. And I can go on and on, but I think we could stop here. And if there are questions, I would entertain those questions.
Okay, I speak now in Portuguese.
Yeah.
Tiago, como faz para você ver se tem alguma pergunta?
No momento não tenho. Porque já encerrou? Já
Como?
encerrou? Já encerrou a apresentação?
Não, ele abriu para
Ok.
pergunta.
Okay. I have a question here, Professor.
Okay.
So, which way do you think is the best way to decrease the intake of estrogen? So, do you think the right diet is one of the best ways to decrease this kind of hormone? And which foods do you think are the least toxic foods, and which kind of proteins are least toxic? And do you think we should eat grains nowadays?
Grains or rice? What did you say?
All kind of grains, like wheat, you can include rice, all kind of grains. Do you think it's nowadays it's good foods to take?
Okay, that's a very good question, because that leads me to the next chapter. The next step is estrogen-free lifestyle. How do we take care of the estrogen? Well, I really think that I have a whole list of things that we should not do. It's not only foods, but also cosmetics and cosmeceuticals. A lot of women, they use cosmetic lotions, deodorants, perfumes. Those things contain estrogen. Parabens, fragrance, mineral oils, petroleum, they're all estrogenic. So if they're having hives that are related to those chemicals, then they should really get rid of it. Unless they do that, even if you're giving them antihistamine, you give them prednisone, the hives will not go away. You have to make sure that they clean it up. Also, the estrogenic foods, the grains, you have barley, rye, wheat, spelt, kamut, millet. Those 6 grains make the estrogen go up. They're phytoestrogen. So if you already have estrogen overload and you're eating those grains, you're going to have estrogenic reactions. So that's why I tell people, don't eat those grains. GMO corn. So anything that has GMO in it is estrogenic. So I tell people, don't do the GMO one. If you want to eat corn, make sure it's organic corn, because if it's not organic corn, then you making your estrogen go up. If you eat organic food, that is very good, because the organic food is going to help you eliminate a lot of the toxins out of you. I understand many people cannot afford organic food because it may be expensive, but for health, if you value the health, maybe you're going to do the most you can to eat organic food. Either you produce your own or you buy the one that you can buy from the market that will be organic. Protein, for instance, in Brazil, I don't know, but in the United States, cows, you know how we feed cows here? We give them grass in the beginning, and then 3 months before we butcher them, we give them corn. And guess what corn we giving them? We give them GMO corn, genetically modified corn. And that GMO corn is contaminated with Roundup, glyphosate. And so when the cows eat that corn, they become big in 3 months. That's the reason they give them that corn. They fatten them up with the corn. So corn then is a fattening food, isn't it? Now, if corn makes you fat, then how about high fructose corn syrup? That is in all the sodas, the candies, the juices. High fructose corn syrup is killing the world. But what do we do? Unless you understand it. So I tell people, don't do high fructose corn syrup, don't do the juices, don't do the candies, don't do sugar, because sugar in America, for instance, half of it is sugar beets. And sugar beets is the #1 GMO in the country. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, then you're killing yourself. That's why sugar is so dangerous worldwide. And people are not aware of it, and they eat tons of sugar. They eat the candy, the cookies, the cakes, and stuff, and that they don't do well. So in terms of protein, if you want to buy beef, you can say grass-fed organic beef. I'm not sure in Brazil how it is, but here they have a grass-fed organic beef. Dairy, they give you the organic dairy, they give you organic milk. But even that, some people cannot tolerate it still. Why? Because the milk, the cows, when they're pregnant, they give you more milk. And so they spew all the estrogen into the milk. So if you have estrogen overload and you want to get rid of it and you're drinking tons of milk, you're not going to do so well. So what do they do? Now we give you the milk alternatives. We give you almond milk, we give you cashew milk, coconut milk, pea milk, soy milk, all of that. That soy is another one. You cannot eat soy because it's highly, highly estrogenic, right? Soy has gnitsin, daidsin. So if you're eating tons of soy, you're making your estrogen go up. And I see that in clinic all the time. The patient come, they say, well, I'm eating high protein diet and I'm eating tofu, and now I'm having hives. If they do that, then they're not going to do so well. So all these things we need to think about when the patient come with reactions that we cannot comprehend. Because if you did a skin testing on these people, they don't have any positive skin test. It doesn't show. You say, well, yeah, you don't have allergies. Well, they have allergies. They're reacting to something. Dr. Tiago, did I answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Well, it was interesting talk, Professor Benoit. But what you put in order to prevent estrogens in real life?
Yeah, so I have this list here. I call it avoid common xenoestrogen and phytoestrogen. So I have a big list that gives you all those estrogens. So I cannot go step by step, but for instance, in many cosmetics, they put aloe vera, and if the women, they're reacting to it, they don't know. Aloe vera, if a woman is pregnant and she drinks aloe juice all the time, she can abort the fetus. So it's abortifacient. So it's a bad thing, but people don't know that. So aloe vera is so great for you. It cleans up your gut. Well, if it cleans up your gut and cleans up your uterus also, so then you lose your baby and you don't even know about that. If you go down, you can see all of these: barley, bay leaf, many of the clover, many of the ingredients we use in cooking. Some of them make your estrogen go up. Celery, for instance. Celery, many people have no idea. It's a highly estrogenic, and then all of a sudden they're drinking celery juice. And that celery juice is not going to help them. Essential oils, lavender, peppermint, tea tree oil, geranium, highly, highly estrogenic. Now, geranium is highly estrogenic, but many times women, they put that, they diffuse that in the air, and they're thinking they're doing good. Do you know how many people do I see in clinic? They say, well, I heard lavender is so good for sleep, and then they put on their pillows, and then they go to sleep, and then they wake up in the morning, they have hives. And they don't know why they're having hives. That's because they're using the lavender. So I have so many cases that we can fill a whole room with it and explain why people are having those reactions. And when they take it out, the reaction go away. Garlic. A lot of time, many people having no idea. If you have a kid who has eczema, tons of eczema, make sure you test for garlic allergy. You will be shocked how much garlic comes up. Many times it will be highly, highly positive. If you do an IgE test of garlic, it will be highly positive. If you test for potatoes, it will be highly positive. So eczema probably may be driven by these same conditions. Very, very important in kids to make sure that we realize it. Fragrance, for instance, if you go to ewg.org, a lot of people who use fragrances, they even say that some of the component of the fragrance is carcinogenic. So we're using perfumes galore, and then we're reacting and we don't even know it. If you come to the next page, laundry detergent. If you realize the market now is giving you 7th generation free and clear laundry detergent. You wonder why all of a sudden they go from the regular one and they're giving you the 7th generation free and clear. Free and clear or what? Well, because the old ones, many of the components make the estrogen go up. So now they're giving you the better one. I call it market intelligence, because when you go to the market and they're giving you products, and then they're giving you several substitutes for that product, you have to be careful. Maybe that product is not so good because they're trying to give you alternatives. That's the case for milk. They give you tons of milk alternatives because they cannot put a banner on top and say milk is bad for you. They just give you alternatives. If you go to laundry detergent aisle, they give you tons of alternatives. So you have to pick the right one. That's the unfortunate thing. We don't know which one is the right one. And so we just pick the one that we're familiar with. But if you pay attention, you will see that some of them are better than the others. For instance, if you look at water, I don't know how much bottled water they use in Brazil, but in the United States, we use a lot of bottled water. Now we have gallons of and zillions of bottled water. Now they're giving you alkaline water. You wonder why all of a sudden they're giving me alkaline water in the market. Well, because we found out acidic water or acid is not good for the body. It can feed cancer and all of that. So now they're giving you the alkaline to balance the acid. But again, it's not all perfect, but people are trying to figure it out, and they're doing slowly, step by step. Avoid dirty food, the cotton, canola, corn, papaya. Maybe Brazil papaya is nice. It's not grown with GMO, but in the US, differently, we grow it back from Hawaii and other places, and they're mixed. So they spray them, they do all kinds of things with it, and it's not as good probably as in Brazil. Professor Sabra, did that answer your question a little bit?
Oh, you answered my question, but you give me a miserable life.
I'm sorry about that.
You are telling me don't drink coffee, don't eat wheat, don't have a tea, no soy,
no. You can do tea. You can do herbal tea like ginger tea, hibiscus tea. You can do a lot of tea, but don't do the caffeinated tea like green tea or stuff. The reason is tea is not bad, right? Not all tea is bad. For instance, we do have tea extracts. We have L-theanine, which is good to calm you down. That's an extract. We have the EGCG tea extract, which is great. But if you do the whole plant, you make your estrogen go up. So many women that will present and they're having reactions because of drinking too much tea. They brew the tea, they put in the teapots, they're doing all kinds of things, and they're reacting. Men too, they don't even know about that. And so they're gaining weight, they don't know why. And so by knowing what is causing those things, then you can take care of it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Dr. Benoit,
Yes.
congratulations and thank you for your excellent speech. I think we could say you have a neuropsychoendocrine immunological interrelationship.
Correct.
And this interrelationship starts during the embryonic phase.
Correct.
Let me read a paragraph of a paper of mine about the hormonal influence during pregnancy on the immune system.
Right.
Progesterone plays an important role in maintaining a normal pregnancy. Lymphocytes have a receptor for progesterone, and is in spontaneous abortion, it has determined that these cells, lymphocytes, have low expression of these receptors. during the embryonic phase, T lymphocytes, natural killer lymphocytes, are inhibited by blocking factor that is progesterone.
Mhm.
So this interrelationship is very, very important.
Yes,
Not only in after offspring, but
I-
also in uterus.
yeah, I concur. I agree with that. And one of the solution actually for reaction is to give progesterone. The problem is when we give progesterone, many times we don't put a blocker. So we give the woman progesterone and it goes to testosterone and becomes estrogen. So in order to be successful, if we give progesterone, we have to put a blocker in it so it doesn't go back to estrogen. And aromatase inhibitors are actually good blockers for the progesterone not to go to estrogen.
Is there a question?
Another question.
Yes.
So is there an acceptable level of estrogen in male people?
So yeah, estrogen level of less than 25 is actually okay. But if it goes over 25, you will see the men over time, they developing gynecomastia. That means they have estrogen overload. And so that's why many obese men or older men, you see that they have breasts growing because they're having too much estrogen. When you see those men, you have to really work them up and reduce their estrogen. You have to make sure that they lose that estrogen because the estrogen also can cause prostate cancer, right? If it causes uterine cancer, it causes prostate cancer. Back in the old days, we thought testosterone is what causes prostate cancer. It's not true. It's when the testosterone goes to estrogen, that's when people get their prostate cancer because younger men, they have tons of testosterone, not anymore, but they used to have tons of testosterone and you see zero prostate cancer. Why? Because the testosterone is not converted into estrogen necessarily. That's why they're not having the prostate cancer. So when you see men having all these symptoms, then you need to make sure they stay away from all these foods, they stay away from the chemicals, you give them a better lifestyle, and then they can do way better than if they did not.
So is it possible to give testosterone to a male with prostate cancer?
So that is a difficult question because many people think testosterone is the problem. So if you give testosterone, it might be possible, but you have to make sure it's not going to estrogen. That's why they give them the aromatase inhibitor. Yes. They give them anastrozole, they give them arimidex, they give them all of that to try to block that. And for men, they give them Lupron to suppress their testosterone production. So then they don't convert that to estrogen that will cause problem for them.
So you said that the aloe vera is not good for us?
Which one?
Aloe vera is not a good food or cosmetic for us to use it?
Aloe vera, yeah. So aloe vera definitely don't do it because it's estrogenic highly.
It's new for me.
Yeah, it is estrogenic. Many people have no idea. And like I said, if you can Google aloe vera and abortion, you will see that if a woman is pregnant, she drinks a lot of aloe juice, she may abort the fetus. If they have, like Professor Bandera said, if they have low progesterone, first of all, many of them don't get pregnant if they have low progesterone, but also they get miscarriage. First trimester miscarriages, most of them are due to low progesterone.
Dr. Thiago.
Sim.
Is there any question from people?
Professor Benoit,
yes.
When you mention the skills enough to avoid estrogen to 25, what will be your foods that you can release freely for the human being?
Okay, so I'm giving you alternatives, foods. So eat plenty of cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli,
Okay.
cabbage, cauliflower, collard green, daikon, all of those good foods, guess what? They make your good estrogen go up. Now, we do have broccoli extracts. We call them I3C or indole 3-carbinol, and we have DIM, diindolylmethane. Those are all broccoli extracts. And they tell people to take those capsules so that it can boost the good estrogen, which is the 2-hydroxyestrone. So the bad estrogen, 16-alpha-hydroxyestrone, has to be balanced. So if you have too much of 16-alpha-hydroxyestrone and other estrogen metabolites, you can get the cancers. But if you have a good one, like the 2-hydroxyestrone to balance them, then the likelihood of cancer is a little bit reduced. That's why many people, they're going on the market and buying the broccoli extracts. But it's not all perfect, because sometimes that has a paradoxical effect of increasing or decreasing the 2-hydroxyestrone. So we want to increase the good estrogen, but sometimes it makes it go down. So unless you test the estrogens, it may not be a good idea to just go out blindly and start taking medication. But you can eat cruciferous vegetables, all of those guys, they're good for you. So I'm giving you good news, Professor Sabra. There's plenty you can eat.
Fantastic answer. I like to say thank you very much. It was a nice talk, one of the most impressive, covering this fantastic association between hormones and disease.
Yeah.
I'd like to tell you something. When you mentioned the books in allergy, I have to say that I have a book called Food Allergy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, yeah, good. I'll check it out.
Yeah, if you send me your address, I send you a book. Okay.
That'd be great. I will do that. And I said drink. Go ahead. Now, most of the time we ignore water. Water is very important. So we need to drink filtered water, because worldwide, it looks like our water sources are contaminated too. In the United States, the aquifers are contaminated. So if the aquifers are contaminated underneath, even if you have well water, the well water is contaminated. That's why you see all this bottled water. So if you buy a reverse osmosis system and you put on your faucet and you can filter your water, actually it's better than if you did not. That's why many people buy the reverse osmosis and they filter the water. But if you do reverse osmosis, make sure you take minerals, because it's so good at filtering everything, it takes out all the minerals. So you may want to bring in some minerals so then you don't cause trouble. And also the pH, it matters. If you drink more than pH 8.5 all the time, pH 9.5, you can reduce your stomach acid and you're not going to be able to digest your food. So then in the end, you're going to need some hydrochloric acid in terms of supplement to be able to digest the food. That's why it's important to look at the alkaline water that people are selling on the market and see the pH. The pH is too high, no good.
Dr. Thiago, you can see, okay, no question.
No question.
You can see whether there are questions from the people, those are watching?
No questions.
No question.
Okay.
Okay. And Professor Benoit Tano, I would like to congratulate again you and thanking on behalf of my service, the Service of Immunology and Allergy, Santa Casa, Rio de Janeiro. And also on behalf of our group, on behalf of Professor Sabra, Professor Tiago, and it was a great honor to have you speaking about this issue. Very important words I heard from you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I hope to meet you again in another scientific meeting.
Thank you very much, Professor Bandera. Thank you, Dr. Tiago, Professor Sabra. Thank you all very much for accommodating this presentation. Professor Marcelo, his group, the ABBA organization, thank you all for making this possible, and hope that we can do a more extensive presentation in the future, because this one, we just give you a synopsis, because I didn't go really in details to give you all the information and cover all the bases, but I think it was fast and give you some ideas. But if you want to know more down the road, we can do bigger presentation. I have actually presentation, I call it on my website, TIAPRO Network. I have done 8 hours of this presentation, and it's on that website. So TIAPRONetwork.com has a lot of information that the students and other people, if they visit that site, they can learn plenty, because not all of the information is paying. Many of them is free to the people to have, so they can go there and they can run around and see what that has to offer. I think that would be good. But again, thank you so much for having me.
Which website, Professor? We can have this material. Which website?
It's called TIAPRO. I will send it to you. It's called TIAPRONetwork.com. So T as in Tom, A as in Apple, Y as in yo-yo, A as Apple, P as in Paul, R as in Robert, O, Oscar, network.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Congratulations once more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.